Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Stories from the Stacks. I'm Patrick. I work here at the State Library. I hope you had a chance to look at our What's On brochure and what's playing on the screen there. This is our second to last Stories from the Stacks for the year, so please join us next month for the one about pubs or lost pubs of Adelaide. Registrations are open now. I want to begin by acknowledging that the Adelaide region is a traditional land of the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and their cultural heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay our respects to the cultural authority of the Aboriginal people visiting, living, or working in the region, who come from other areas of South Australia or Australia. So I have the honour of introducing Tim Reeves. He's been kind enough to give us a talk on his beautiful book, if you don't have a copy, on sale now, and signed by the author if you would like. Tim is an Adelaide-based historian and an award-winning author. Adelaide Modernism is his fourth book and his third about houses. He is an adjunct research fellow at the University of South Australia. One thing to remind you of, if you wouldn't mind checking that your phones are on silent or off during this presentation, we do record it and live stream it, so we'd love it not to hear your ringing tones. So I will pass it over to Tim. I'll just bring up his PowerPoint.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? All okay? So it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about the creation of Adelaide Modernism, including about using the wonderful resources available at the State Library, and they really are wonderful. So my talk will be in 6 parts. 1, conceptualizing the book. 2, pitching it to the publisher. 3, researching it. 4, writing it. Fifthly, I'll tell you the story of pulling together the entry for one house in particular called Manon. And finally, I will show you exterior photographs of 20 stunning houses from the book. So let's start with conceptualizing. I love houses. I always have, and this is my 3rd book about them. In late 2020, I was eager to write a new book, and so I tried to focus my thinking around a possible topic. Adelaide seemed a good starting point. I recalled reading the autobiographies of Bob Dixon and Neil Platten, and you'll see these books are on display here if you want to look at them afterwards. Both important Adelaide modernist architects, and especially in their eponymous firm of Dixon and Platten. I went looking and also found monographs on earlier local practitioners like Brian Claridge, Russell Ellis and Harold Griggs. There was also the rare 1964 publication, Houses Around Adelaide, and that is there. I then reacquainted myself with Stuart Simon's 2019 book, which perhaps some of you have, Modernist Adelaide 100 Buildings, noting that while he had focused more on major public and commercial buildings, he had included around 1/3 of houses. So the library was a wonderful resource to track this material down. But it was the discovery that only 11 Adelaide modernist houses out of 150 nationally had appeared in this book. It's a bit of a whopper. It's 2017, it's called An Unfinished Experiment in Living, Australian Houses 1950 to 1965. And yes, there's a copy over there if you want to have a look at it. That's when I sensed that there was a gap in the literature. Only 11 Adelaide houses out of 150. Several months of concentrated research, especially of the extraordinary John Chappell archive here at the State Library, of which more later confirmed my thinking. Over and over again, I came across publications, books, architectural journals, home magazines, where modernist houses from Melbourne and Sydney invariably dominated. Yet it seemed to me that Adelaide had played a critical and very successful role in the dissemination of this style in terms of housing. And so in February 2021, I pitched a book proposal to Michael Bolan at Wakefield Press and secured a contract. Adelaide Modernism 101 Houses was born, carefully worded to distinguish it from Stuart's book. So Modernist Adelaide, Adelaide Modernism, 100 buildings, 101 houses. I had to work at that for some time to get it right. It took 4 years for the book finally to appear in February this year. It was a lot of work. Now, showing you that. To talk about pitching the book to the publisher. Obviously, what I'm about to share with you applies only to non-fiction. My first 2 books were published by the Sydney-based Wakefield Press. I sent this book proposal to Wakefield Press because of its focus on South Australian histories. I was very lucky to have this opportunity as they are no longer accepting proposals, only completed manuscripts. Regardless, it's still a very useful exercise for an author to undertake, as it helps to confirm exactly what their book is about and who will read it. The key information is contained in the concept, which should not exceed 1 page. You can see the headers, working title, synopsis, proposed format, audience, partnerships, and author. Anyone reading this should have quickly a thorough understanding of what the book is about and, crucially, how it will fit into the marketplace. You may have a great idea for a book, but you must also convince a publisher that it will sell. That's absolutely crucial. I followed this concept page with a list of selection criteria I created to guide me in the selection of houses, a preliminary list of the 101 houses, and 5 draft entries. The latter included the first and last house. And the last house was this one, the Stevenson House, built on Greenhill Road and completed in 1974. How many people can recall this house? The body in the freezer house. Yes. That's the last house in the book. It was not only architecturally significant, but also had a gruesome story to tell. Michael Bolan, the publisher at Wakefield, received this document from me and about 2 weeks later requested a meeting. After 15 minutes, he offered me a contract. I was off and running. Given the book was going to be expensive to print, I was not surprised when he requested a publisher's subsidy, a cash amount to offset production costs. I agreed to this on the spot, securing most of it with a grant from the History Fund of the History Trust of South Australia. Now, it was time for more intensive research, and I had a very lucky break. John Chappell was an important Adelaide architect, especially in the modernist idiom. He ran a highly successful solo practice, but also found the time to write a weekly house column for the Advertiser, normally featuring a modernist house from the 1950s into the 1970s. Here is an example of one of his pieces, and excuse my writing over it. It's actually one of the houses that's in the book. I spent months using the microfiche here at the library to track down these articles. They would normally feature a story written by Chappell, external and sometimes internal black and white photographs taken by an Advertiser photographer when a house was newly complete, plus a floor plan from the architect. Here's another Chappell article of Dixon and Platten's first house together, also in the book, The Lee House. And Margaret Lee came to the launch of the book, and she's 95 and she's still living in her house after 66 years. These three elements were exactly what I needed for the format of the book. A house could be viewed when newly finished rather than later when it may have been poorly maintained, had a badly conceived extension or renovation, or, as I discovered so often, had been demolished. Unfortunately, many had been built on large blocks that, when it finally came time decades later to sell, were perfect for an even bigger house or a multi-residential development like townhouses, which is a great shame. The Chappell archive had been donated in 2004 by John and his family to the State Library. It contained a mountain of photographs plus those wonderful floor plans. This was gold, but more than that, the library had digitised over 4,000 of these items for a 2021-22 exhibition, which some of you possibly saw, Lust for Lifestyle, Modern Adelaide Homes 1950 to 1965, mounted in the library's main gallery. I want to acknowledge here my UniSA colleague Dr. James Curry and the library's Mark Gilbert, who co-curated that exhibition. I sought and was granted permission from the library's then director, Jeff Strempel, to reproduce this material in the book. The State Library became the book's main sponsor, together with UniSA's Architecture Museum, which was another wonderful source of visual material, and the South Australian chapter of the Australian Institute of Architects. You can see the logos there, including the History Trust. Adelaide Modernism simply would not exist without these partnerships. At the end of this part of my research, I had a good sense of the book's parameters. This would not be an academic work, but written for a general readership. I would use a very broad definition of modernism that centred on the use of new technologies, materials, architectural forms, and ways of conceiving space. The first house would be dated to 1939 and the last to 1974, so 35 years. There would be over 50 suburbs and over 70 architects, with nearly half their own home. And designs would comprise one-off houses, but also blocks of flats, as well as public and project housing. There would also be competition entries, including one that was not built. Following the format of my first two books, and this is the one which is the history of Australian house design competitions, houses would be arranged as entries and chronologically according to year of completion. Around 80% would incorporate a short story about a house's conception, construction, and experience of being lived in. Unfortunately, even with the Institute of Architects' help, there were some houses where I could not locate the original architect. I also had difficulty tracing some owners. After consultation with the publisher, the decision was made to include the houses but without a story. Indeed, a key element of my research was talking to people, especially the commissioning and subsequent owners and the architects plus their families. I remember Tony Parham, whose house is on the front cover, who was still living in his home and in his 90s when I talked to him. He related the story of him and his wife inviting the architect and his wife to dinner when the house was finished, lighting the fireplace and the living room filling with smoke. Tony was roaring with laughter as he told me. He had a flawless modernist house, save for a dysfunctional chimney. I also remember talking to Claire Treloar, another nonagenarian. Her 1955 house, there it is, quite beautiful, had an almost flat roof with no eaves, and I asked if it had caused any trouble. And I interviewed her in a nursing home. She was fabulous. She flashed me a wry smile and said, "It leaked with the rain and groaned with the wind." And added that the west-facing windows that you can see right there in that wing overheated the bedroom wing. I just adored both of them and was grateful for the nuggets of information they were gifting me. The book would not exist without stories like these, or it would be much the poorer. And I do record here my regret that a number of people, including Tony, that I interviewed, did not survive to see the book's publication. Now, to turn to the writing, the hard part. I had a strict word limit of 425, again from my previous books, for each house that featured a story. A lot of the stories were quite moving, especially when you consider that many owners ended up with houses that were ridiculed or reviled or just gawped at. It was just so new. And when architects were trialling new materials, so sometimes there were risks in embracing a style that was still evolving. Entry 17 was about a German immigrant called Günther Niggemann, who came to Adelaide and set up a company to build prefabricated modernist houses. This is the simple and quite beautiful home the firm built at Hectorville. But they couldn't convince people to buy. It was too advanced for Adelaide. Niggemann sold up and went back to Germany. He never returned. I was incredibly fortunate that there was a photo from 1953 at the library, as you can see there, and not just a floor plan, but the full A3 plan incorporating many other design elements. This came from another archive, one related to the architectural firm of Lawson, Cheeseman and Doley. This was before Chappell's time. And look here at the story in the advertiser, and you can see the house, including the photo in the middle, which shows that they're using tubular steel. So that's the prefabricated element of the building. And the floor plan, very simple. The house was so highly regarded that it even appeared in the National Journal of the Institute of Architects. Adelaide could have been at the forefront nationally of this approach to design and building. Nickerman's story is sad, even tragic. You can get a sense here of how the 425 words roughly are arrayed in an entry. The story is brief but packed with information. This means that an entry can be read in a matter of minutes and understood with the aid of the photos and plan. So a person can read the book from beginning to end and at their leisure, or they can dip into the book reading entries randomly, or by choosing a favourite architect or period or feature of modernist design. The reader has complete freedom. I also wrote a simple 2-page introduction. Now, fifthly, I want to reveal to you how I pulled together the entry for one house in particular, the Jean's house, or Manon. All the material of which I'm about to talk is also on display for you today, except for the floor plan, unfortunately, but these elements are also on the table over there if you want to look at them afterwards. I was in the library leafing through a magazine called South Australian Homes and Gardens, first published in 1931, when I came across the July 1949 issue. The two houses at the top were quite ordinary, but not so the one that graced the bottom of the page. I was completely captivated by this house, the flat roof, the striking arrangement of cubic and planar forms, the central tower element. It was confident and assertively modernist design. I was lucky, as you can see there just to the left of the photo, that the owners and suburb were identified. I walked out of the Somerville reading room where you go to peruse all of the library's South Australiana and strode to the opposite end of the building to the electoral rolls. There they were. Jeans 2895 and 2896, Mervyn with a Y and Cherry Jeans, back in the days when you didn't have a house number, just of 5 Share Avenue, St George's. As soon as I got home, I checked the internet. They had a housewarming party in 1949 and they invited 100 guests. Then I discovered a story about their son, Nick, a composer who had written a song about his father, one of the rats of Tobruk, who had returned from war shell-shocked. And that's the father on the left there talking to General MacArthur. I tracked down Nick, who told me a lovely tale about sleeping on the roof of the house on summer evenings. But he knew almost nothing about how the house was commissioned. He didn't, for example, know from where its name Manon came, and I never did find out. Then, the real break I needed. The house had appeared in Australian Home Beautiful in July 1950. I was fortunate to know a person who had catalogued these articles. I came into the library and shock horror. In the whole volume for 1950, the July issue was missing. You can see up the top it says July OP out of print. The library is reliable almost all the time. I ordered the article from the National Library, which has digitised many of the back issues of Home Beautiful. And there it is. And that's Cherry sitting on a chair in the front of the house. And you can see, again, this is also on display. It's blue curtains in that wing, and the next wing, they're red curtains. It's kind of Mondrian. It's really interesting. So there was the story I needed about how the house came into being, and some wonderful photos, including that one of Cherry. But best of all, the architect was identified, Arthur Philpott of Evans and Brewer and Partners. This was a practitioner who was not currently in the book and who needed to be, I decided. I am immensely indebted to Sharon Frost, the library's senior archivist, who knew that they had an archive for this architectural firm. It had not, however, been fully examined, and she and her staff went through it laboriously until, hey presto, the draft plan for the house was found. And it was glorious. Not just the floor plan, bigger than an A3, not just the floor plan, elevations and sections, but also the site plan and foundation plan. It even included the detailing for the kitchen cabinetry. And if you look at the kitchen dining room, that cabinetry sat between the two of them, and you could pull the drawers between the kitchen and the dining room. They slid between them. The most wonderful design back in the days when you could do that design and someone could actually build it. But you've got a really good sense of the house there, especially the front elevation. Finally, I remembered from my second book on house design competitions, a 1945 contest around Australia hosted by the Sun newspaper in Melbourne. A booklet of 50 plans resulted, and I confirmed that Arthur Philpott was the only South Australian to be featured. While the perspective of his design was rather staid, the interior design language was remarkably similar to Manon. This booklet was a national publication, so another element sourced from the National Library. These are the moments when one feels truly blessed to be a writer. Here is the 4-page entry as it ultimately appeared in the book. The photos, which have come from Home Beautiful, include a rare front-loading washing machine in the kitchen, almost unheard of at that time, an ensuite off the master bedroom. You can see a hand-built small swimming pool, the final photo, and just behind that, a log cabin in which the Jeans lived while the house was under construction. Isn't that extraordinary? And of course the floor plan. So that got a 4-page entry. Some are 2 pages, some are 4. That definitely deserved 4. Sixthly and finally, I want to share with you black and white photos of 20 houses from the book. This small sample is indicative of the breadth and depth of modernist residential architecture that was produced in Adelaide. I'm not including the 11 outstanding houses that also appear in An Unfinished Experiment in Living. this big chunky book. As well, architects are represented only once. However, I'm not bestowing any kind of imprimatur on the houses that follow. There are many, many other fine examples that, mainly because of time restrictions, could not be included. Ellis House, 1943, by Russell Ellis. The architect's own house is set in an almond grove and features striking views from the top deck. The photographer is Max Dupain, who came to Adelaide in 1943 and photographed a number of houses. McConnell House, 1943, by Jack Hobbs McConnell. Also the architect's own house, and a rare example of 3 stories with a basement garage. The garage is on the right, going down. Another Dupain photograph. I found both of those at the State Library of New South Wales this time. Thankfully they were there. It's a stunning house and a stunning photograph which came from the daughter. Shedley House, 1950, by Jeff Shedley. Anyone who knows Elizabeth would know Jeff Shedley. He did a lot of the design work up there. A superb example of US West Coast modernism with strip windows and vertical planks of Californian redwood. And that is the architect on the ladder. They bought an old chicken pen with 2 other friends, and he designed the houses, and they built the houses around there. And this is in Burnside, and there was no sewerage back in those days. It's not surprising to tell you that it's been demolished. Treloar House, 1955, by Geoffrey Ashton. This is the back view of the house I referred to earlier, the house with the problem with the roof that groaned with the wind. It's still a confident and elegant design for a difficult site by a freshly minted architect. The exterior is washed in grey to conceal the uneven quality of the bricks. And the view from the living room there was straight to the airport, and fabulous views at the back. I wonder if you know where this house is. Walkley House, 1956, by Robin Boyd, his sole Adelaide commission. The top floor cantilevers on 3 sides over the ground floor. The beautifully coloured floor plan is the basis of the book's end papers. And that was actually built for a professor of architecture who decided that Robin Boyd was a better architect and employed him to design the house. Also, there's a fabulous story about something going wrong with the structural calculations and a beam bending while they were building it, and Robin Boyd having to fly over from Melbourne to actually redo the calculations. I wonder if you'd notice the cars too. There's a Ford Zephyr. There's a beautiful sports car in the Walkley House. This is the Verdaz House, 1956, by George Parker. The front elevation includes a processional ramp, a sophisticated addition to Adelaide's growing repertoire of modernist houses. I think I've squeezed that in a bit too much. Sorry, it's MacArthur House, 1957, by Kevin Hocking and Theodore Bumanis. The butterfly roof has wide eaves and includes a section carved out for a garden fronting the second bedroom, which you can just see there on the right. Don't know what's happened to that one. This is the Doley House, 1957 by Morris Doley, which is still standing, thankfully has been saved. By its use of materials and positioning on a wooded lot by a creek, the architect's own house is intimately connected with its site. Quite different form of modernism. So this is the house that's on the front cover, Honeywood Parham House, 1958 by Ian Campbell. Built using post and beam construction, a graceful house that sold recently for the first time and thank heavens was bought by a family who are going to restore it. The daughter was very upset that it was, because it's on McGill Road, that it was going to be demolished. Now, I wonder if you know where those apartments are. South Terrace, yes. Park Home, Park View and Park Lodge, 1959 by John Chappell. 72 flats in 3 rectilinear blocks, the largest development of its type in the state at that time. And there's bed-sitters, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Haven't really lasted very well, don't look great, but they're still standing at least. Galanyi House, 1959 by Harry Seidler, his only Adelaide house. And I assume you know Harry, that's Sydney, one of Australia's masters based in Sydney, now dead unfortunately. Classic multi-level skillion roof design by Seidler, still standing in Beaumont. Someone bought the house and decided to build the master bedroom in the carport, and Harry found out about it and he was furious. He's always very protective about his architecture. The Zolt House, 1959 by Bob Dixon, a large and dramatic house that includes a double-height living room with a view of the tennis court, and the master bedroom is at the back, looking on to the living room, for the owner of the Aqaba Hotel. Big house. I've included this house because it's a really simple, all-timber house, but it's really lovely. You know, it just shows modernism, it doesn't have to be complicated. Jeffrey House, 1961 by Angus Breakey. A simple inline design for an all-timber house at Salisbury Heights. So another suburb I wanted to include. I didn't want to have just inner Adelaide suburbs. The dining room opens to a pergola-covered outdoor eating area. You can just see there past the carport. But look at the views. I doubt that house is still standing. Muir House, 1964 by Pauline Hurren, who died only about 6 months ago. A low-pitched roof is supported in the living rooms by steel portals that stylishly extend outside to a terrace with a built-in barbecue, which you can just see here. And in front of the bathroom and toilet, there's breeze blocks. Whoops. Yes, this house is still standing. The Brook House, 1963 by Ron Byrne. South America comes to Adelaide in a house of light orange brick and concrete block and incorporating a brise soleil in the western wall. Thompson House, 1965, by Ian Hannaford, an early commission using a steel frame and floors of suspended concrete. The house's sharp linearity contrasts with the tall pines. That's in Springfield. There's quite a few houses from Springfield, and it's still standing. I think someone unfortunately has painted the brick, for which they should be flogged, but don't quote me on that. Roberts House, 1966, by Dick Roberts, the architect's own house. Textbook flat-roofed modernism with a central courtyard and carefully arrayed furniture and fittings. In the book, there's the photos of the interior with the beautiful courtyard and the furniture, and it's absolutely stunning. Nairn House, which has just come up for sale, 1968, by Jeff Nairn, built for his parents for only $14,000 in 1968. Concrete block and I think that could be asbestos sheeting. With this house, Nairn became the then youngest recipient of the South Australian Institute of Architects Award of Merit. 2 to go. This is one of my favourite houses. It's absolutely beautiful. It's actually on display up in the Treasures Wall. Higgins House, 1968, by Brian Snowden. Tiered roof lines emphasise horizontality and create a planar elegance, a strong contrast with the eucalypts that tower over the house. And look at that sunbeam, very smart car. And finally, number 20, the Jansen House, 1973, by Peter Jansen. A follower of the organic maestro Bruce Goff, Jansen built his own house based on a hexagonal module and over 8 levels. So that selection represents roughly 1/5 of the book's entries. The whole volume for me demonstrates an extraordinary diversity and quality in the residential work that was produced in this period by Adelaide architects. However, this is not purely a celebration. As I state in the introduction, the book shows, quote, modernist architecture in all its guises and with all its strengths and flaws, unquote. Nevertheless, I hope Adelaide Modernism starts a conversation not just within the state, but at a national level as well. Thank you. Do we have a microphone for questions? Patrick? Are there any?